I'd like to welcome everybody to this Mebkin Abbey Forum for Contemplative Ecology. Father Garrick is unable to join us tonight, but on behalf of him and on behalf of Mebkin Abbey, we just wanted to extend a very warm welcome to all of you, for those coming for the first time and for those joining us for another month here. And this forum was created to honor the memory of Brother Kyle Berceau and his vision for this gathering on contemplative ecology as we gather together to deepen our experience, both individually and collectively, of ecological spirituality. So we're grateful to his memory and to all of you who are carrying that rich legacy forward in our gathering here this evening. And we're very fortunate tonight to be joined by Evan T. Pritchard, who has become a friend and a mentor of mine. I've had the chance to get to know Evan over the last few years as we have put on a Marist Earth Day gathering in upstate New York by the Hudson River, or the river that runs both ways. And Evan has blessed us with a morning prayer by the river for the past few years. And so it's a real gift to welcome him into this community. And as a bit of background, Evan T. Pritchard, a descendant of the Micmac people, has taught Native American studies at Pace University, Vassar College, and Marist College, and is the director of the Center for Algonquin Culture. Steeped in bird lore by his Micmac great aunt, Helen Purley, he is the author of several books, including Native New Yorkers and the book I have here called No Word for Time. A regular on radio shows such as NPR's Fresh Air and on the History Channel, he lives in the Hudson Valley of New York. So very warm welcome to Evan. Thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you very much. Nice. Thank you for the introduction. I feel moved to do a little welcome song, Micmac welcome song. And so it's very difficult to sing together on Zoom, but we can do a call and answer. If you repeat what I sing immediately, it'll work out. Okay. But you have to have faith. Zoom is a sometimes thing. So I'll try it this way. I'll start with a shaker, nice slow beat, and I'll sing a line and you sing it back. Okay. You a hi hey you a hi ya.
You a hi ya.
You a hi ya hey you a hi ya.
You a hi hey you a hi ya.
Way hi ya hey yo yo way hi ya hey yo.
Yo hey hi yo hey yo.
You way hi yo way.
You a
Hi
Okay, then they say daho.
No.
So it's very hard to understand. Daho means like amen. Daho. And some people say ho. So that's that's Lakota, yes. And so I'm speaking Mi'kmaq or Micmac today. And so that's my ancestral language. So Sam and I are good friends, and we kind of click, right? So we're walking similar path. So I want to ask you, Sam, do you think I should do the contemplative exercise right away, or talk about myself a little bit, or our relationship to Mother Earth?
Yeah, well, I would welcome you if you feel compelled to offer a contemplative practice to ground us in this space together on our collective earthly home. As you feel compelled, if you'd like, Evan, you can feel free to enter into your a bit of your biography, but I'll leave that up to you if you have another practice you'd like to offer.
Okay. Yeah, you already kind of leaned into my biography very nicely. So what I think, I have this bowl. It doesn't really matter what kind of bowl, but I've been using this in ceremony for many years. And I want to show you a tobacco ceremony that is 7 different parts. And so are they going to get a recording, a copy of the recording, Sam?
Yes, we'll be sure
You
to
know?
post the recording.
Okay. So there's different kinds of tobacco. There's kinnikinnick, and I have some of that too. But today I'm going to use this regular store-bought tobacco, but this brand has very few preservatives and chemicals. You know, a lot of tobacco has flavoring, like brandy and whatever, and that's really not traditional or good. You know, when it burns, it creates problems. But this is just very straight tobacco, has a little bit of menthol, but you can see. Okay, so the Micmac people are part of Algonquin culture. Now, Algonquin culture, whether you heard it or not, is one of the longest, oldest, biggest, most important cultures in the world. It's at least 10,000 years old, and it's been right here in the United States and Canada for that whole time by different names. But originally, you see, we called ourselves, as far as back as anybody knows, called the people who wear the deer skin. And so there's different reasons. I wonder, you know, why they call themselves, our people call themselves that, our ancestors, when in fact most of the tribes wear the deer skin. But in fact, the word Kichi Atuk Wogan is the word. Kichi means great. Atuk is a certain kind of deer. It's the northern boreal white-tailed deer, which we had an entire region. And in fact, our region, which is very large, is the same as our earliest territory, was the same as the northern boreal white-tailed deer, which is the one you see. And that's the one that has those male bucks with the huge antlers. That's one of them. And so we have this tradition, you know, the northern boreal people who wear the deer skin. And my little thought is, you know, maybe they told the young children when it's talking about, you know, where all this deer meat comes from. Oh, you know, yeah, we wear all the deer skin and we use all the parts of the deer when we put them to sleep, and, you know, we eat the meat and we use all the bones and everything. So we wear the deer skin. So one of the things I think, one of the reasons this unusual name, Kichiatugwogan, is to assure people that we use every part of the deer and nothing is ever wasted, because the deer gives up his life for us. And so we want to make the most of that and not waste an ounce of any kind. And it's true. And so my native friends, they'll make rattles, you know, even out of the bones, the pieces of bones. And they'll wear necklaces out of deer bones and hats with the antlers and everything. So it's all used in meat. So this tobacco, though, I'm going to show you 7 types of tobacco prayer ceremonies as a deeply contemplative exercise that I myself do, and I find very useful. So the first thing, when you hold the tobacco, there's power in that. So you don't want to be angry when you hold the power. You want to be the tobacco. You want to be calm and loving, because that's what's going to project out. The tobacco is what I call Algonquin gold, because the Algonquin people use it for everything. You can use it 10 times a day, and each time it's for a different purpose. You might use tobacco to communicate with an animal in a friendly way. You may use tobacco to help find game. You could use tobacco to heal yourself. You could use tobacco in a peacemaking ceremony, that you bring spirit into your discussion about how to find peace with somebody that you're in conflict with. And this is actually very much part of what's called the way of the heron, the bird, that is. It's a peacemaking. You can use the tobacco to talk to spirit directly, and it helps your prayers. It's a medium that your prayers can be sent out and the spirit can actually go into that tobacco for that moment and goes to God. And also with Mother Earth, you can communicate with Mother Earth, and you can make an offering to when you're asking for help. It's always good to make a payment, right? When you want something, it helps to have something to offer in exchange, because we say that the whole world is one big exchange, that everything in nature, we're contemplating on nature, it's all an exchange. And the word Satsyiwan for change is the same as the word for exchange. So when you're exchanging the tobacco for something you want to happen. Now, what's interesting is you can't control that. You have to trust in God. You put your tobacco out to Great Spirit, which is the same as, in Christianity, you have the Holy Spirit. It's really the same. And so the Creator is also another word for God. And so you have this tobacco, and so you want something. You want guidance. You want wisdom. You want help, protection, and you offer the tobacco. So it could be, you could use tobacco many times a day. And there's a being in stories, his name is Abachbahamedtch. And actually, Abachbahamedtch is a giant. And the giant, his name means he's food for the pipe. And that can only be tobacco or kinnikinnick. And so when you look at what Abachbahamedtch can do, is he helps the people talk to the animals. And he got upset when the people stopped talking to the animals and just started killing them without asking permission. And so he became very angry, and this is what people remember about him. But in fact, he was not angry for centuries, and finally he realized that people weren't talking to the animals anyway. So he got mad. So that shows us that tobacco is one of his main roles, to communicate with nature. And so it doesn't really matter how much. This is how much I have in my hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a number of prayers. Now, your prayers, when you're asking for something, it should never really be selfish. It should be asking for wisdom or knowledge. It's very important, knowledge. Asking for courage. These are all good things to ask for. You can ask for happiness, by the way, and it actually works. I use that one. Sometimes I'm not happy, instead of just, you can change your life always, but you could also ask Creator to help you be more happy. And then that can lead to the changes that you need to make to be more permanently happy. So I have this tobacco in my hand, and I use it in my left hand because that's closest to my heart. And so I say, I surround myself with a medicine shield of healing white light that nothing can penetrate to the next turning of the earth and forever. So that's the primary one. So I start with myself saying, I surround myself, and you can repeat after me like this. I surround myself with a medicine shield of healing white light,
of
healing white light,
Healing white light.
that nothing can penetrate
That nothing
can
can penetrate.
penetrate.
to the next turning of the earth
The next turning of the earth
Turning of the earth
and forever.
and forever.
forever.
So when you say for the next turning of the earth, visualize your next day ahead of you, the next 24 hours, and just visualize it going well. Do you not want it to go well? Sometimes people resist this idea. What? Visualize a whole day going well? I don't know. That's going to be hard. Well, what else are you going to visualize? It's going to go bad? Don't do that. It's going to do what you tell it to do to a certain extent, and then the world has its own ideas, as you know. And so, and God laughs at our plans and all of that. So you're holding the tobacco. You say, you're visualizing the next 24 hours, the turning of the earth, and then you put the tobacco down. I'm putting the tobacco in the bowl so it doesn't get messy. If you're outside, you could dig a hole in the ground and put the tobacco in the ground. It's very powerful. So I'm going to get more of this tobacco because I've got 6 more to go. And these are just the basic ones. This is called tobacco prayers. So when Native people are talking, say, we're going to do some ceremony, we're going to do some tobacco prayers. And this is more or less what they might do. So I take the second handful and I talk to our loving creator. The word in Micmac, Gizul. Can you say that? Gizul.
Izo.
Not a word you've probably never heard. Gizul. It means loving creator. It has the word creator in it, has the word loving in it. Gizul, loving creator. So we address the loving creator. We say, loving creator, I ask you to surround me with a medicine shield of healing white light that nothing can penetrate to the next turning of the earth and forever. Now, see, the difference is this time you're letting it go and it's not you, you're asking the creator to help you with this, because the creator's got a lot of juice. You know, however much juice you think you got, the creator's got a whole lot more juice. And that means the power of creation itself. So let's go with this again. I'm going to say this again. This is number 2. I say, Gizul.
Izo.
Surround me with a medicine shield
Surround me with the medicine
Surround me with a medicine shield
of healing white light
of
of
healing
healing
light.
white light
that nothing can penetrate
that nothing
that nothing can penetrate.
for the next turning of the earth
for the next turning of the
The
earth
next turning of the earth
and
and
forever.
forevermore.
and forever.
Forever.
There's my tobacco, and now my prayers are in the tobacco. And I place it in this hole or this bowl. It's not a super bowl, but it'll do. So then number 3, those are the 2 important ones. If you only have time for 2, those are the ones. Number 3, I pray that I be guided every step of the way during the next turning of the earth and forever, because I am the tool of the creator. So this is called the tool of the creator. And I wrote about that in No Word for Time, which Tam is reading, a whole section about that. So when you're the tool of the creator, you're just there. And I like to think of it, if you know anything about baseball, you're a shortstop, you're standing there and you're ready to move, but you don't. So that's the same as the tool of the creator, is that you're in a state of readiness and awareness, acute awareness, but you don't do anything until the creator tells you to. So you got that impulse from spirit. And I learned a Celtic word, awen, last night. It's the same thing. That's like that motion that moves you. And so I'll hold the tobacco and I'll say this in parts so you can repeat. I pray to be guided.
I pray to be guided.
I pray to be guided
Every step of the way
Every step of
every step of the way
during the next turning of the earth.
In the next
during
turn,
the next turning of the earth
The wise, the Tony, and forever.
and forever.
and forever.
A reason I add the forever is if the following day you forget to do this prayer, you see, then you're covered. Because the main part's for 24 hours. And you can visualize that 24 hours going well, and some people have that as a sign that difficult. But then you put on forever in case you forget. So this tobacco goes right in the bowl. That's 3. Now this is a very, very good one, and I hope it's going to work for me today. I say, I pray that my words and actions will be medicine for others, whether I know how those words are understood or not, for the next turning of the earth and forever. So that if you ever do any speaking, if you ever have to speak to people or teach, even with your family, it's really useful, because it's amazing how it works. Is that sometimes I've said that prayer and then given a speech, and I've said something I don't even know what I was talking about, and then somebody would come out afterwards and say, "Oh, that part? Well, that was for me, because you talked about my mom or something." So I'm going to go to this in stages. I pray that my words and actions
I
I
pray
pray
that
that my words and actions
will be medicine for others,
will be
will be
medicine
medicine for others,
whether I know how those words are understood or not.
whether I know
whether I know how those
words
words are understood or not,
For the next turning of the earth and forever.
the next
for the
turning of the earth
next turning of the earth and forever.
Forget the next day. So visualize that whole day going well. and that your words will be medicine for others. By medicine, I mean healing, maybe even mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. 5, I pray that I do no harm to others, either intentionally or by accident, for the next turning of the earth and forever. This is a very important one nowadays, because our lives are so complicated that you can hurt people you don't even know, right? And with your car and with your bicycle and with your internet and with all kinds of things, you can just, make a mistake or an ignorance and you can hurt somebody. So this is your insurance policy for your karma there. I pray that I do no harm to others, either intentionally or by accident, for the next turning of the earth. So I'm going to ask you to repeat in sections. I say, I pray that I do no harm.
I pray that I
Pray
do
that I do no harm
To others,
to others,
to others,
either intentionally or by accident,
either
intentionally
intentionally or
accident,
by accident,
for the next turning of the earth and forever.
for the next
for the next turning of the earth and forever.
There, so you're all covered for that one. That's your liability insurance, folks. The real way. So better than Geico. So 6, I pray that I may be shown ways to help creation continue in large and small ways for the next turning of the earth and forever. And this one I do say every day. And this is a real solid Algonquin prayer, because that's our goal in life. We have many goals, but above those goals are like the 4 spiritual goals, and talk about that later. But then the ultimate goal is we want to help creation continue. And if you're not interested in helping creation continue, maybe you're in the wrong room. But I think you're in the right room. It's not that hard. Just desire for creation to continue. If it doesn't continue, then you won't probably know. So here is 6. I say, I pray that I may be shown ways to help creation continue.
I pray that I may be
Pray
shown
that I will be shown ways to help creation continue.
Excellent. Okay. In large and small ways.
Large.
In large and small ways.
The next turning of the earth and forever.
for the next turning of the
For the
earth.
next turning of the earth and forever.
Now, this time of year, we drum the sun up, because the sun is so pokey. We want it to get shining and bright, so we drum songs to the sun, and that helps creation continue. So now this 7th one. No, this is one that's more personal to me, but it works for me. I'll share it with you. I pray that I be given the gift of inner happiness.
I pray that
Pray that I
I am
be
given the gift of inner
Given the
happiness
gift of happiness.
and serenity when I need it,
and
and
serenity
serenity when I need it,
When I need it.
regardless of my surroundings.
regardless
Regardless of my surroundings.
Okay, and here's one may sound quite familiar. Excuse my throat. Remind me to walk in balance on the earth.
Remind me
Remind me to walk in balance on the earth.
Thank you. And that's the same as walk in beauty, if you've ever heard that expression.
Yes.
May I walk in beauty. It's a great Navajo hit song. We say the same thing. Maybe I'm walking in balance. So here's the last tobacco, the 7th tobacco offering or tobacco prayer. And I put it into the bowl. And then, there's time. It's like, I want to take this bowl and put it outside and place it on the earth as a gift to the earth. And it has all our prayers in it. Okay. And so when I sit on the earth, the prayers will go out. One of the things that tobacco can do also, by the way, is to absorb anger. And it can be like a sponge, and this can save your life. If you're really angry and you feel like you can't even drive a car, yet you have to drive a car, and you have tobacco, you can put it on your heart like this. And we say, Muhua Luwe Wudi. This is when I left out by accident, but one of the most important tobacco prayers in Micmac is Luwe Wudi. Can you say that? Lu Wei
Wu
Wu
Wei
Di.
Wu Di.
Yeah, that means Wu Di is your heart, and Lu Wei means bad things. So Mu Hua is no. So it's like Mu Hua means no, Lu Wei is bad things, and Wu Di is your heart. So you're saying, let there be no bad things in my heart. So this is a very, very important tobacco prayer and have separate. So let me get some tobacco and we'll really do it. And again, if you have any anger in you and you have a situation where you have to go in to teach kids or whatever, or deal with a situation, you can use tobacco to take the anger out of your heart. That's one of the main traditional purposes. So we say Muhua Luwe Wudi.
Ula Luwe Wudi.
And then it's in the tobacco. I'm going to say you push the tobacco, excuse me, you push the anger forward from your heart right into the tobacco, and it absorbs it like a sponge. And when I'm doing this with kids, I say, "Oh, I got it. It's there. It's there. It's there. And then I put it in the bowl, and it's gone. It's amazing how it feels. So that's the next thing is that, that part of it is to heal yourself of anger. So those are very valuable spiritual preparatory exercises. And once you've done them, then you can do a lot of things more easily that you might not have done otherwise. So you can experiment with that and see if that helps you in your spiritual practice, because that's what I do. And I did this. I've seen all these things done by elders, but I never saw one elder do all of them at once. But I thought these really work. So I'm going to use these every day. And so that's my spiritual practice, and I'm sharing that with you from my heart. And I hope it works.
Thank you.
So Sam, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that heartfelt grounding practice, Evan. I think you brought so much joy and inner peace to so many of us through those exercises. And, I thought we would begin our conversation by hearing a little bit more about your ancestry. And particularly, you talk a lot about your relationship with your great aunt, Helen Purley, as a great wisdom keeper in your Micmac heritage. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about your ancestral line and particularly your connection to your aunt.
Sure. Well, since my my mom's from Maine, and I've just been really loving and missing Maine lately. It's really nice now, but it's kind of touristy. But back in the 60s, I go back to the 50s. I was a very, very young man, but I remember Maine in the 50s, man, it was rugged and it was, everybody knew everybody and it was a very loving environment. And yet, of course, in the winter, amazingly cold. And I remember the snows being 7 feet, and so what happens is that you shovel every day. You don't miss any days. You keep shoveling the same path. And so after a month of that, you have a tunnel. It's like a hallway through the snow in your yard from your door to your car or your sleigh or whatever you have. So it's amazing looking, but in fact, it's very simple if you do it every day. And the same thing with your spiritual practice that we just did. If you do it every day, you will create like this whole amazing life. And you say, well, how did I do that? Well, you did it every day, just like shoveling that same walk, so you've got to be focused. So focus is very important. So talking about growing up and 5 years old, 10 years old, we go to Maine every summer, swim in the ocean, and it was very healing. And my great grandfather was an absolutely amazing person. Like they don't make him anymore. And he moved from Canada, from like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And he was concerned about the reservation schools, that they were stealing the kids of Native people and sending them to the schools where some of them would die. It's really not funny. And he found that out because he was very connected. And so he pulled out of that and he moved to the US. And made little complicated things that he made an association with the Passamaquoddy, who were one of the main tribes in Maine, and very closely related to the Micmac, hardly any different, really. And so he helped them. They had their, I think it was 1900, they had their lowest point in their history of thousands of years. And they were starving and they were cold and they had, their homes, they got to burn down or something. And so he went in there and he found some wood. I was wondering yesterday, did he find a way to mill some wood? Did he buy some wood, or did he have a team of people go out and cut it down and make a cabin? I'm not sure. But he built like 7 new houses. And so the Passamaquoddy were very happy with this. And so they made him an honorary chief of Passamaquoddy, knowing he's Micmac. So the records show him being Passamaquoddy, which is, I'm just finding out. And so his daughter, Helen, was also known as the Passamaquoddy, but all she talked about mainly was Micmac. But they were very dedicated to helping the Passamaquoddy because that was their new state. See? And there's really no difference in the Micmac and the Passamaquoddy. No, they're not very different from each other. They don't care. So that's what I grew up, hearing we were Micmac. And there were mentions here and there about this aunt that I had. But they'd say, well, you'll meet her when you're older. I said, well, why older? I want to meet my aunt. Oh, don't ask those questions. So about 1968, as I recall, summer 68, I think it was, they said, okay, well, your great aunt Helen is requesting your presence, So they took me there and they left me there. Oh my God. And she was one of the most powerful women I've met, very strong, very outspoken, and a fanatic for the environment. She was like way ahead of the curve in terms of environmentalism. I don't think there was anybody who was more outspoken about taking care of Mother Earth, and even the scientific part of it. She was all into the science of it. She was on TV all the time. She was on radio all the time. There were 3 interviews with her in Salt magazine. There were 2 articles about her in Reader's Digest. And she was quite renowned. And presidents brought their animals to her when they were sick because they heard she was the best. And she had the bird medicine where she could speak to the birds and the birds would listen and do what she told them to. It was pretty amazing. And she knew, of course, the species and all this, but more importantly than knowing the name of the species, she had the knowledge, not only the names, she had the knowledge of their behaviors and how to communicate with them. And so I wrote a book. The book I wrote with her was called Aunt Helen's Little Herb Book, which has 80 herbs from her yard and all the medicine powers that those herbs have. But then I wrote more recently Bird Medicine, series of bird shamanism. And and she really was the one who had the bird medicine, that she could tell the bird what to do. And they would tell her what to do. And it was quite remarkable to see that. So it really, I worked a long time trying to develop this gift she had. And then one day, finally, this kind of came to me. But there would be miraculous things happening with the birds. So this is like just reaching beyond the interspecies barriers to see. We don't need them just direct, but it's all nonverbal, you see. You have to be able to get into that intuitive right side of your brain that's nonverbal and understand their actual emotions, and also the species, very important part of it. So that's what I wrote about in Bird Medicine. So 1968, they brought me down there and left me. I was 12 to 13 years old. And I wrote a poem about this, but I don't have it here. But she looked at me and she said, you look just like my father. And I'd never heard that before. But it was my mother's grandfather. You look like my father. I bet you're him. Come back to me. I don't know. But then she kind of grabbed me and says, you're going to be the teacher. You're going to preserve these 10,000 years of oral tradition. You're going to preserve the plant knowledge and the medicines and the animals. and don't screw up, And she's a fierce woman, and skinny and elderly, you can imagine, but just like made of steel. My favorite story to tell people how tough she was is that, she was camping. She was living on her land and she hadn't built a house yet. She was living in a tent. And so she was married and she got pregnant. And so somebody said, well, you can't do that. You can't just be pregnant without a house. What's the matter with you? So she built a house while pregnant in the wilderness, She was that tough. There's all kinds of stories that are in Aunt Helen's Little Herb book. But anyway, she really scared me and impressed me. And she wanted me to understand herbs, because that's a connection where we can actually communicate with the plants and benefit. And one time I was there a long time and I was getting hungry. She said, "Do you want to go out for lunch?" I said, oh yeah, I do. And McDonald's had just opened and I was a little kid. And I was sure she meant go out to eat for lunch at McDonald's. I just filled in the blank, right? So then she took me by the hand and took me to the swamp. He said, and pointed to the plants in the ground, said, "There's your lunch." But then, I was really shocked at first. But then she kind of got down the ground with me and she picked the plants and handed them to me and asked me to pick some. And so we went in and we made a salad and whatever, in her kitchen. And so that was a little bit about Aunt Helen. But she could communicate with all aspects of nature in a remarkable way. And she knew the Micmac traditions. And she was also good in the ocean. And she was the best clam digger in Maine. And she actually won trophies. Because there'd all these men would get out there who had been digging clams their whole life with those rakes. She just had this knowledge of how to tell where they were. And there were little holes in the sand sometimes. And she'd go right for it. And she would get twice as many clams as these big burly men. And she would brag about that. She was also a painter, by the way, and was well known as a painter. And she's in several galleries. I went online to see if any of her paintings were still on display. It turns out, I think they're in the Chicago Art Institute or something, and the Boston Museum. These paintings are like out there, and I didn't know. But she was wonderful painting. She gave me some of them, and she would create. It was all her paintings were about nature scenes or landscapes, but that a spiritual aspect. And she'd paint this one painting. He said, "Do you like that? It looks kind of like summer. Do you want autumn?" And so I said, "Yeah." And so she'd paint it all over again, like autumn. And in the Snow Tree, which is a book, I hope you can see the cover. This the Snow Tree, I think, comes out in reverse. But this was from that time period. Is that I was out this time of year. This Snow Tree story. This has just come out. This is a prototype. 50 years I waited, but in the book, I went out for a walk, and the first signs of global warming, I think, because this is way back then, and it hadn't snowed. It's already February, and there was no snow, and I was concerned, and so I went out in quest of snow, and to pray for snow, and I walked, and the first thing is I found a hole going under a tree, and I reached way in, and I felt something hard, and I pulled out a knife, and I thought, well, there must be a reason that God's given me a knife, and then I walked some more and I found a perfect walking stick. So I walked with the walking stick, and I'm making this whole long book story short. And then I got to the river that I'd never been able to cross ever because, I was this little kid. On the other side of the river, I saw that there were great giant trees, but I could never even see the tops of them, even from across the river. But this day, I got to the edge of the river, and it was all solid, frozen. And it was like a miracle, like the Red Sea. So I could walk across this great river all by myself. And so I walked, and then I was in the most beautiful forest. And what struck me were there were no beer cans, and there were no Coke cups and football cups. And There were no trashy papers and cardboard. It was like one of the only places I'd been outside of Maine where there were no beer cans. And so I thought this was a sacred ground. So I felt for it some more. I said, well, I want to know about this snow. So I came to this giant tree and I'm looking up at the top of the tree and I was thinking, I can't see the top of the tree. It's like a mountain. But mountains have snow on the top and maybe the tree does. So I reached up for this vine and I pulled on it and it broke off my hand and I was looking up straight up and a snowflake dropped in my eye. And I thought, aha, the tree is like a mountain. This tree has snow on the top because it's so high. So I need to pull more snow down. So I took my walking stick and I took my knife and I carved a hook in the walking stick. And I reached up and I could reach the next vine. I started pulling on it. I could pull it all the way down and then I swung on it. And it was like in a belfry, ringing the bell. I felt like a monk, ringing the bell in the tower. And it started to snow and the snow got more and more until there was a whole snowstorm. And I thought, well, that's a good day's work. I saw, well, I wouldn't say now as like solve global warming, but in that time period, nobody said that. So then it was getting dark, so I had to go home. So I got back to my mom and she was upset. She said, I didn't know where you were. You didn't tell me where you're going. Your supper's cold. And I couldn't think of anything to say because I didn't really want to explain about me being the one that made it snow, because that sounded kind of, like bragging. So I just said, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. And so then I wrote the book shortly thereafter and gave it to her for Christmas the next year to say, this is why I was late. This is why I missed supper, because I made it snow. So then, of course, once it's snowing, all the birds can wash themselves and, the bird baths. And kids can make snowmen and snowwomen and ski and make angels in the snow. And so that was my gift to humanity, right? At a young age. So that was the time period. And that's how Aunt Helen and I did things. So I'm sure you have more questions about Aunt Helen. She was amazing. There's a book about her called Mrs. Pearlie's People, which is by another author. And that book is still out there on the internet. And it tells stories about her forming her own tribe as a young girl of other young girls. And she said that her, in the book, it says her name was Wild Chief. And when I met her in 1968, she was still a wild chief, let me tell you. Very bossy and demanding, and yet always right. And she understood ecology like very few people, and taught it. She taught the chief of the Passamaquoddy when she was a teenager all about birds, and so that's part of why she became a member of the Passamaquoddy and her, like her father. So, but we're Micmac, if that's confusing, and we're so similar. There's hardly any difference. So I wanted to say, Sam, you or anyone has any questions about Aunt Helen, that's kind of where a lot of my teaching comes from.
Well, thank you for sharing such evocative stories. I just felt myself so captivated by all of the details and all the visuals you were able to evoke, Evan. So thank you for that. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your connection with birds in particular. You mentioned on Helen's relationship with birds, and I know you've written a book on bird shamanism as well, which I actually had the chance to obtain when we visited your Native American storytelling workshop with grandmother Nancy Turtle just a few months ago. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about the revelatory quality of birds and what we can learn from different species of birds in particular.
Yeah, well, sure. Aunt Helen and other teachers talk about owls as having a particularly good connection with the spirit world, specifically of the land of the dead, because we all are surrounded by those spirits, and some of them we want to see again, and some of them we don't. So it's good to have a doorkeeper. If owls have that gift, they can communicate at times with those who are passing over, especially when someone is in the process of passing over. And then they can communicate messages to loved ones to make them feel that they're still out there and it's not just the end. So my Aunt Helen had a neighbor whom I knew who was a blind woman, and she could only see very little, but she would go out to the fence and hang out by the fence where there was a tree, and in the tree was a nest of owls, and particularly one white owl that was very distinctive. And she would stand there until Aunt Helen came out to talk to her, and they'd talk about all this, the mystical stories about birds. Well, the woman who was blind, the neighbor, had to move. She was married, and her husband moved to the beach to open a beach house, a motel. And so that was a big deal, and so they decided to keep in touch more or less. So one day she was at this house, this motel, and she was upstairs in the kitchen. And I've been to that kitchen. There's a big window looking out to the woods, facing west where Aunt Helen lived, about 4 miles away. And one day this owl came, the same owl came and started bashing against the window. Well, she's hard of seeing, so she needs that. She needs to hear that sound. And she knows that something is going on. So she goes and looks right up, her nose against the window, and she sees it's the same owl with its nose against the window on the other side. And it's going, whoa, 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 and banging on the window very loudly. And she said that the bird told her telepathically that Aunt Helen had just died. And she believed the bird. So she turned to her husband and told him, well, what's that bird telling you? Just the bird told me Aunt Helen just died. He said, oh, well, wait for the phone call, let's be reasonable. And the phone rang as he said that, right? And he picked up the phone and he goes, oh my God, Ellen just died. So that's what happened. And that's became a kind of a famous story. So I was working on the book, Aunt Helen's little herb book with her. And she kicked my butt around the block about, she knew her grammar and syntax, and she, had complaints about, mistakes I had made, misheard things. And we had just finally gotten to the final version, was all done. And she was 94 years old by the way. And we got to that point where, okay, I think it's good now. And so that's when she died. And she held on until that last moment. So then she had a funeral. And I'll tell you a funny story, family story, but she had an assistant who was my cousin who helped her with all the animals. He was very good with animals, also obviously Micmac. And she decided to marry this fellow who was not at all in the native tradition. He was a businessman, and he just was totally, that was his whole life. And he didn't really understand a lot of other things. And so she says, oh yeah, you marry him over my dead body, right? And we don't know if she meant it. But as it turns out, they had the wedding ceremony in this church. And I went up, I was planning to go up to the wedding and bring the copies of the new book. But then she died. And so the funeral parlor was right next door to the same church. And that was weird, okay? Because here's Aunt Helen's gathering for, honoring her death, and here's the wedding. And it's like the same moment and almost like conflicting, and there was her dead body. So we worked it out, and everybody decided to, split the time so people would go to the funeral and then go all over the church and have a good time. And then I handed out all those books at the wedding reception, and everybody was very happy. And so that's kind of like the kind of thing that spirit would work very strongly through her. And that's how the book, Aunt Helen's Little Herb book, came to be. But then my sister had the gift that, that she wanted, that Aunt Helen kind of bestowed on her the gift of bird medicine. Because my sister, was very intuitive. And so she was very, very good, became a game warden at one point. And it was later when she and I were working on the book after Helen died that we got her sense of her help. And I actually almost like one day just woke up communicating better with birds and understanding them better. So what happened was some Cheyenne people had asked me to work on this, and so I was supposed to go and ask the elders, first of all, are birds sacred? And of course they all said yes, birds are sacred. And then the next question I was supposed to ask was, why are they sacred? And they all said the same thing. They all said, well, I have no idea why they're sacred. That's not about my pay grade. But let me tell you a story. So all the elders told me a story, not knowing what any other elders were going to say. And there's about 200 elders and 200 stories. And they were all completely in line coast to coast without knowing each other. They all told the same kind of stories. And it's about species. Every species has a very specific job. They all agreed about which species had which jobs. And yet, I'll tell you that at that point in history, no one had published any of this information. So how did they all know, having not read it anywhere, the same exact, very complicated scenario? Well, because it's been told and handed down for 10,000 years. There's always been birds around as long as we've been around. And so there's a little hint of the story. It's about species. Every bird has a job. So I have a deck that I made called bird medicine cards. And it works in an amazingly accurate way. I can tell you how, but I'll go into schools and colleges and I'll hand out the cards. Everybody picks one at random. And then they tell me what card they picked, and I can tell them all about them. And the accuracy is quite amazing. And so this one guy, I was up in Vermont with a bunch of Native people, and this one fellow, now I guess he was 50 maybe, but strong looking guy, and he picked the owl, the large one. And so I'm just feeling this. I said, you picked the owl. And I said, well, you know what the owl does? It tells people when somebody's died, the owl will go and tell the survivors that, their relative has died, and reassures them, that it's okay. Well, I said, so have you ever done that? He says, actually, that's my job. I work for the police department, and I'm the guy who goes out there and tells people that their relatives have passed on through some incident. That's all I do. So I thought, well, there was one. I mean, there's an example of how the bird cards work and how owls work. And so there's another one got a healing card. A grouse is a healing animal. And this Native woman took the grouse. I said, so are you involved in healing? Have you ever healed anybody? She said, I'm a head nurse in the local hospital. He questioned. Everyone was like that. So, I think the Native people, maybe they're in their right, these people were in their right jobs. So I'll tell you, when I was 5 years old, my 5th birthday, my mother put on a headband like this, her hair down, made tea. We drank the tea. She turned the cup over and turned it around 4 times in the disc and lifted it up to read the tea leaves. It's called teomancy, and it's a kind of oracle to tell the future. And she was very good at this. And so she looks, she's done this many times, and she looks at it and stares at the cup. She says, no, this is not right. She says, you're a comedian. I said, what do you mean? She said, you'll put a joke in this cup. And I said, well, no, I don't know anything about it. I didn't put anything in your cup. She said, yeah, you did. She said, there's a pregnant rooster in your cup. And that's your sign. I said, well, so pregnant rooster. And she said, yeah, roosters can't get pregnant. I said, who says? That's not fair. What about equality? The roosters be equal to anybody. So the hens could have pregnant. Why can't a rooster? She says, because roosters are male and you're a male. You can't be pregnant. well, we discussed this. She said, well, you know, she had to save herself because she got, you know, rattled by this. She said, well, you know, when you create something like a poem or a picture, which you do, that's a little bit like giving birth, you know, and so maybe that's what it means. But the rooster part, we'll see. Well, it's interesting that, you know, I grew up as an artist and as a writer, and, you know, I'm prolific. So I'm always in labor producing these things. And sometimes I write a book, it might take 9 months, or a symphony might take 9 months, or a very long poem, or a big painting, you know. So that part's true. So also, in terms of telling the future, and of course, this is Groundhog Day, and what better prophet do we have in nature than the woodchuck, which is the Algonquin word, because they can see the future. They can see when the winter's going to end. I don't know if anybody heard what Constantine Phil said. I don't know. He's very busy. He didn't call him. But here's the thing, is that the rooster knows when the sun is going to come up. And they start crowing the sun up even before you can see it. So how do they know? Because that's like prophecy, you know. So I kind of like to say that there's a new dawn coming. And it's not coming very easily, is it? But it's coming. And as a rooster, it's my job to remind you that the dawn is still coming. Every bird has a job. Every bird has a specific kind of message and ability. And if they don't do their job, it makes it harder for everybody. So we need to take care of our birds. So that's just a little tiny bit. And you can read bird medicine that's in the stores. It goes into lots of species. So there's 4 gatekeeper birds. These are the birds that are most powerful. You got the eagle, which we associate with the north of this bird wheel. And then in the east, you have the hawk, which is associated with the color red, the red-tailed hawk, like the sun coming up. In the south, you have the crow. So that's, you know, the teacher and storyteller. And the west, you have the owl. And the west is the direction you go when you're passing on in the spirit world, either temporarily or for a long time. So that's the owl in the west. So those are the 4 power birds. There are other powerful birds, but those are the gatekeepers. So that's the key to understanding our Algonquin ways of communicating with birds. There's more to it. So, Sam, you have another question about that? Or anybody have any questions about Aunt Helen or about birds or my growing up? I'll tell you the story about, you know, talking about how wonderful Maine is. And my great-grandfather was what many people would say was a medicine man, but having left the tribe, he couldn't really say that. But there was an incident. He moved to this town in southern Maine, and
reactions.
Okay, hold on. He moved to a town in southern Maine, and so he was away for the day, and his wife Hattie was in the kitchen, and all of a sudden 29 Passamaquoddies walked into her kitchen, all dressed in traditional regalia. And she was a little surprised. And she said, "Hello, can I help you?" Meaning to be polite. And the 29 Passamaquoddies all said, "Oh, no, we're fine. We don't need your help." And so, "Why are you here?" And they said, "Why are we here? Why are we here? Do you know what day it is, lady?" And she said, "Yeah, it's June 21st. She said, "Yes, June 21st. You know what day that is? Solstice?" "That's right, it's solstice. And you know what?" She said, "And if we go into the Atlantic Ocean in the morning, right at the moment of sunrise, and there's going to be this red light flowing across the waves, slowly from the sun, reaching towards the shoreline on June 21st. And when that red light reaches the shoreline, for us, that's healing water. And if we can bathe in the healing waters at that moment, with that red water, then we'll be healed all for the next year. We won't get sick. And you wouldn't want us to get sick, would you? I said, oh, no, no. So, okay, so make yourselves at home. So they just did and made themselves at home. And then her husband came home and she had a word with him. Let me tell you, what the heck is going on? And he invited these people. He says, well, when I was up in the northern woods on the Canadian border in winter, this is, we're talking 1900, and I was stuck in a snowstorm, in a very bad snowstorm. So I made an igloo and survived, but they found me and they brought me into their village and they rescued me. Okay, thank you, Brenda. And they helped me, they brought me to their village. And so I said, well, thank you very much. I'll have some of that soup. And if you're ever in my neck of the woods, just drop on by, okay? So that's kind of how I talk. They don't have time, they don't have calendars, but yeah, anytime, just drop on by. And so guess what they did? And he forgot to tell his wife. So that's what kind of happened. That's a famous story. Now, when I was that same year, 1968 or so, I was very young, maybe a little older, walking along the shoreline there in the beach. And I was walking along and a seagull swooped down and dropped a whole large fish at my feet. And so I lifted the fish and I held it up to the, big fish, held it up to the seagull. I said, well, thank you very much, but I'm not hungry. So I'm going to let this fish go back into the ocean where it belongs. So I thank you, and I will call myself Seagull. So I began to be called Glochendietchi, which is Micmac for seagull, or Guelan. And so for years, I asked people, why did this happen? I don't understand. I don't understand this particular spot. It's like my power spot right at the bottom of the road where my mother grew up, right at the edge of the beach. And I asked all these people, what does this mean? And I asked my Aunt Shirley, who was my mother's sister, and she said, oh, I don't know, who knows? And then when I was working on the bird medicine book, and Aunt Kay, her name, was very elderly, and I asked her again, I said, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you know why the seagull dropped a fish at my feet at that particular spot? She said, actually, I've known all along, but I couldn't tell you. She says, your grandfather would go to that spot every morning at sunrise. When the red light reached the shoreline, he would take tobacco and do tobacco prayers like all of us just did. He would do it there every morning at that spot. And he'd pray for all of us. He'd pray for you too, because you were just a baby then. And so obviously that's why the seagull gave you the fish. It was a gift from him somehow. We don't know how. But that's the spot he would do those tobacco offerings. So I'll leave my story there for now, and because that brings us back to the beginning. And so, Sam, what's next?
Thank you for sharing another really poignant story, Evan. And
we have some hands.
Yeah, we could continue all night just hearing these amazing stories. I do want to make time to field some questions from our participants here this evening. Evan, before we did that, did you want to show those practices that you brought? Was that something you want?
Yes. Yeah, I forgot.
We'll transition soon into the Q&A, but I did want to give you a time. I know you prepared these practices to offer to the audience. Maybe we could go through those at least quickly.
Yes, please help me. I'm going to do share screen.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm not sure. How do I get to my screen here? How do I see my screen? Okay, hold on.
Yep, there it is.
All right, now. All right, so I'm going to do highlights here. So this is a book I wrote. I'm sharing the whole book with you today. And I just made this PowerPoint today so you can see it. 10 simple ceremonies to honor the earth. And I'm just going to go through the highlights here for the sake of time. So one is we offer tobacco or cornmeal to the water and to the earth and honor the elements of water and earth. And if we're outside, we dig a hole in the ground and offer the tobacco to the soil and into the hole and cover it up, restoring the surface when you're done. If inside, you make a hole in, say, like a flower pot with your finger and put tobacco in and cover it. So you pour water in a bowl or leave it in the glass and place a pinch of tobacco in the water. An offering to the water in gratitude, for water is life. So life is a river and we share it with all beings. We ask our life be like that of a river flowing gently forward. So there's the introduction. Okay, so we improvise a song to Mother Earth. We sing her a song from our own heart in gratitude for all we have received. We offer a song of thanks as her children. Beating a drum or a table or chair in a rhythmic way will help focus the song and help the words flow out. We talk to a living tree or plant as a messenger of and to Mother Earth. If you are inside, you can talk to a potted plant, offer tobacco or cornmeal, and send a message of love, gratitude, and concern and compassion for Mother Earth, and ask for healing if you like, and a greater oneness with all her children. You see there's little messages in the pictures. It says, I hear you. So as you're saying this to the tree gives you a sign somehow that it can hear you. Now, I was thinking of even doing this on screen, but probably frighten you, I don't know, but you can write on birch bark, a piece of paper or birch bark, if there's anything troubling you and you want her to know, the Mother Earth to know and help you heal your heart. So you take a strong marker and you write on the birch bark or a piece of paper what it is you're troubled about, and then you light it very carefully. And then we make a prayer ribbon bundle to tie it to a tree. You need 6 ribbons. You've got red for the east, white for the south, yellow for the west, and black for the north, and green for the earth, and blue for the sky. And you will need an invisible ribbon as well, which is the direction of the heart, which is the 7th direction. And if you can't get ribbons, visualize. So cut either 3 or 6 of each, 6 feet long, either 3 feet long or 6 feet long, while praying for wholeness. Then tie them together, and then tie the bundle to a tree where you see it when the wind blows. If you can't go outside, tie it to a doorknob or a light fixture or a curtain rod inside the house, because I know it's winter. Outside bundles should be replaced every 6 months. So here's one branch with 6 visible ribbons and 1 7 invisible ribbon, and you hear the rainbow is speaking to you, saying, I hear you. Now, these aren't all in numerical order for some reason. Doesn't matter. Then you go to a fireplace or go outside to a campfire circle and burn it in a safe place. This is your birch bark. It burns quickly and you can even explode. Be careful. You may need to drop the bark quickly, so make sure there is nothing flammable between you, even dry grass, and the ground. Keep burning until all the letters have disappeared. And this is very powerful because you may hear or see signs confirming your message, like here the crow is saying, I hear you. Now 7, we enter a contemplative state and speak to Mother Earth. Speaking out loud, we start with words of praise and thankfulness. Then let the flow of the words continue until the flow takes you. Let her know who you are and why you are here. Let her know in words how you are feeling and give her permission to help you. So you go out, either in or outside, enter that contemplative state and ask for help, but make sure you use prayer and praise and thankfulness. Number 8, place stones on the ground or the floor in the form of a medicine wheel in the 4 directions. If you can't get outside and you have no stones, use ritual objects as you see fit. Find out where the 4 directions lie, or the place where you stand, north, south, east, and west. No, well, north, east, south, and west. Then imagine a circle in the ground or floor before you. Then place the largest stone in the center, then the next largest on top of that, to represent Mother Earth and Father Sky. Then place your next largest stone in the east, the next largest in the south, the next largest in the west, and the next largest in the north. Then place small stones in between the circle stones until you have 8. Or you can place 6 small stones between each of these directional stones, and you have 28, which would represent the nights of the month of the moon, and then add 1 more for the new moon. As you create the wheel of the world, place your prayers in each stone to help heal the planet and all beings that are a part of it. Now, if you feel the need for mourning and your sorrow, cut a snip of your hair and let the wind take it as an offering, as an expression of your grief and everything that has done to the earth. It doesn't matter how long the snip is, just cut it with scissors. Hold it in your hand and declare your intentions. And some ask for forgiveness and compassion this way. If you ever harmed any part of nature, this is good. It's good to do this. If inside, place the snip in an envelope and remember to offer it to the earth later, perhaps the next morning. In doing so, we acknowledge that her fate is our own, and what harms the earth harms us all. We have the clouds of crying. In 10, sorry about my throat. We lay upon the earth, the Mother Earth, the covenant of mutual protection and love. Face down, our hearts touching the earth, and become one with her and all it is, but also face up as in the picture. So often we have felt separated from her, looking out our tiny windows, our tiny doors to see what we call nature, when in fact we swim in an ocean of natural beings and in the light of Great Spirit, which fills every aspect of space and fills us as well. Honoring the earth is very powerful energetically and may help you open up your heart to hear her voice. However, it is not enough in itself, because once your heart and mind are connected to the web of life, then action will surely follow. Taking action to heal the environment while doing the least harm is the most effective way of honoring the earth. May the spirits of the land keepers, the ancient ones who once lived and performed similar ceremonies where you live, continue to guide you and help you find your way. So there I say, all my relations. So feel your heart opening, especially in the natural world, and connect to the plants and the animals and the insects and the sky and the earth, and be happy. So then this was a back page of this little book. And it says all the planets on a tree. It says, in regards to Earth, I say, best planet in the solar system, Evan Pritchard. So that's my endorsement. We are all related. Thank you. So that's new.
Thank you, Evan.
Brand new PowerPoint. Just made it today. A few bugs to work out. Thank
Wonderful.
you for reminding me. So do it. Oh, so the books are available too. Sam can get you my P.O. box, and they're $5. Very reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to put your P.O. box in the chat if that's okay with you, Evan, in case anybody's interested in ordering books. But I'm grateful to you for gifting me a copy of this 10 ceremonies to honor the earth. And it's been a real treasure for me. So thank you, Evan. And we'd love to.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to transition now to hearing some questions from our audience. And maybe we'll start in the chat, because I know Peter had a couple of contributions. And yeah, maybe if Peter's still with us, we'll allow you all to come off mute and maybe just relatively briefly voice what you were hoping to share.
Yeah, hello. It would be easier if I could get back to the chat. You spoke so quickly. Let's see if I can find. Goodness, I'm sorry. There's one thing that's brief, but it touched me as you were talking about birds today, and that was, let me get my hand over there. That I was at a lake nearby today, feeling kind of weary, but deciding that I could walk a while. It's a lovely place. And so as I was kind of turning a corner on one of the paths, I saw a woman ahead of me looking, it seemed, across the grass and toward the lake. And but when I got there closer, I could see that she was holding her phone in this direction, and I asked what she was doing. Well, she had seen a bluebird on a post about 30, 40 feet away near the water. And when I say bluebird, she didn't know it was a bluebird. She knew it was a bird that was blue, but it just enchanted her. And so I said, "Oh, the bluebird of happiness." And she'd never heard that phrase before. And I encouraged her to walk just a little closer, and she did with such intention. A very unsophisticated woman, just ever so carefully, a few feet at a time, until the bird took off. But I felt like that beautiful blue bird was just kind of there out of its own, generosity, I guess. And so I just wanted to share that. Birds are always there. The same day today there were buzzards up above and crows and so on. But down here at ground level on a post was just this simple, absolutely blue and perfect bird.
So early in the year. It's an early bluebird. Thank you. Several of my elders have said emphatically that in the native tradition that the bluebird does bring us messages of happiness. Two different elders, three different elders who didn't even know each other, just said emphatically, of course, that's our teaching. And I also understand that in China they recognize that. And so that's real. That's very old tradition. So
yeah. I told this lady, I said, well, look it up, the bluebird of happiness. She'd never heard it. She was just not whatever that means, educated woman, but she certainly found the beauty out there. She didn't need to know the words, but I encouraged her to look it up. I don't know if she will or not. But it's nice to know it's a kind of a worldwide feeling.
Well, mostly, I wouldn't say it's worldwide exactly, but Asian and Native American are closely related, and so it's one of those things that seems to have spread from wherever to wherever in that group.
Yeah,
it's very ancient. One of the things that also the Navajo have stories about the bluebird, which are in my book, Native American Stories. Oh no, it's in the bird medicine book. I believe so. So wonderful story about, he was living with his mother. It's like a single mother. And finally one day he asked where his father is. And because the other boys are asking, and she says, "Oh, your father, yeah, he's always looking over you. And your father is the sun." And he goes, "Oh yeah, right. Okay." Well, he goes and tells his other kids, his other friends, that the reason why you don't see his father around is because father is the sun in the sky. And then they really start to make fun of him in a nasty way. So he's crying, goes to his mother, because the kids told him his mother was a liar. So now he's really upset. So he goes, "Mom, you're a liar." And the kids say that you're a liar because you told me my father was the sun, and that's BS. She says, "No, it's not. Your father's the sun. And so I'll take you." So she says, "The way to go, we're going to walk all night towards the east, go to this certain spot at the edge of the desert, and you're going to wait for the father to come up, because he comes up from the east, right? So, and then he'll tell you and he'll explain everything. So she left him there in the middle of the desert, facing the east. And what happened was he fell asleep, you see. He was out there at night. And so then next thing he knows is the sun is sitting next to him, right? And he says, "I am your father," right? And he's like, "No way," He's not sure he's awake or asleep. He says, "So, okay, so I'm your son," right? He said, "Yes. And someday you will grow up to be like me, and you will become the sun in the sky." So he's gone from being like this, orphan, or worse, and now not only is his father the sun, but he's going to be the sun. And he says, "Well, what proof do you have that I'm the sun? Because I'm just a little bird." He says, Look at your heart, my son. Look at your heart. What do you see? So, the bluebird looks down at his heart, and what's on his chest but a sunburst, right? There's an orange sunburst on his chest.
Uh-huh.
And he said, you're right. Oh my gosh, my heart is the sun. He says, yes, look to your heart and you will grow and become like the sun. And so it's a long story, but the sun begins to tell him all these details about what it is to be the sun in the Navajo context with all the ceremonies of the sun. The sun has to know them in response. He teaches them all this teaching. And then, and then he has to leave. He says, okay, so now you know. So the boy, Blueberry, goes back, to his mother, and now he's very confident that his father really is the sun. So that's an old Navajo story, but I love that story because the bird actually has the sun on his chest, in his heart. And so obviously it's a spiritual metaphor, right? That we're all bluebirds because God is in our heart. If we look down, we look in our heart, and then we can see that we can become more like God and be shining like the Son of God. Anyway, it's a great story.
Beautiful message.
If I can, if I don't want to take over, but you asked about my two questions. The other one was brief, and I wrote it early in our talk. It seems to me, in my very little bit of Native American derivative practice over the years, that when we speak in what we at least assume to resemble a native tongue rather than English, that the practice feels more real. And I don't know if that's just this way that many of us have of wanting to, kind of enter a world they haven't known before, or if there's more to it. What can you say about that?
Oh, well, I've done a lot of experimentation with that, and it is absolutely amazing because English is more of an invented language, and it's more of a treated and negotiated language between other languages. So it's very watered down, very derivative, and it's a very recent language. Whereas languages like Lakota, Micmac, and Hopi, these languages came up out of the vortex of life itself. Nobody invented them. There's an incredible power that is only in these ancient languages, and so I've done experiments with that, and I've asked people to experiment in talking to animals in Aboriginal languages, the oldest one, and everybody has said that they immediately notice a difference, that the animals and birds respond dramatically and delighted and surprised and will run over to you and stare at you when you speak native languages. So you might want to experiment with that. And I'm not going to take sides. Of course, Micmac is the greatest language ever, but so is Lakota, so is Hopi, and yes, you can speak to nature with that. And again, tobacco helps, but people recently, someone came to me and said, I tried that thing where you said speak in, I guess it was Micmac, to the animals, and they were amazed. Totally different experience. So I think that's part of it. It does resonate.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. So I encourage that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Evan.
you're welcome. That's
I think we'd love to hear from Diana and Gerard had their hand up for a while. So we'll hear from them. And then I think we have a couple other questions in the chat as time permits. So yeah, Diana and Gerard.
Diana and Gerard, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Mute here. Hold on a sec.
Yeah, I got it.
I can't. I can see you, Evan. So we're good, huh? Okay.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, two quick things. First one, 50 years ago, I'm 70. 50 years ago, I was in Alaska, and I was given the book, I Heard the Owl Call My Name. Roman Catholic priest wrote the book, and he heard the owl for others. Finally, the owl called for him, and he died. Do you remember that book?
Well, yes and no. I would rather say, for this purposes, I would say I can't.
Okay,
I can't bring it up. But yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
okay. Moving on. Do you any reason for not feeling you can speak about it?
Yeah, my memory is not perfect. Even though I had amnesia when I was briefly. I don't really like to talk about it, but I had to restore my memories, and so every once in a while, rarely I come across something that I just don't remember.
Uh, um, it was a moving book, and it being in Alaska and entering into a volunteer teaching corps in California just stayed with me. Um, I'd like to ask you one other thing, and I won't comment after this. Leonard Peltier, um, a voice, a person, a representative of activism, uh, respected by many, vilified by many, uh, persecuted by the U.S. government. Um, any comment on where you see activism in Native America is heading or should head?
Um, well, I'm trying to think. Some of the spiritual leaders around the world have reached out concerning Peltier and felt his innocence, and Bishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama and a number of others, world spiritual leaders. I think Pope Francis has spoken over the years about this. And so this people who believe those, spiritual teachings are good, kind of makes the American political system look bad. I know that Bill Clinton was very interested in releasing Peltier completely before he was elected. And then when he was elected, he was told he could not do that. And there were probably threats and I don't know. But I think clearly FBI had a grudge. So in terms of activism, he's really a hero. And his daughter, Kathy, has taken his place, so to speak, and been very active. And in terms of activism in general, I think the campaign for addressing environmental issues is probably the most urgent of all. And yet, sometimes in the media, you don't actually get the full urgency of it. You hear all this blah, 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 but people are afraid to come right out and say this is like a gun to our head. And Peltier and others, understood that it all comes down to Mother Nature. It always comes to belonging to the earth, which is our, motto, so to speak, and really part of our spirituality. And so that's could be threatening to industrialists that say that, the activists, the native activists are saying, we are of the earth, we belong to the earth, and we have nowhere else to go. We're not going to give that up. And so behind all the kinds of activism, there is that element always. And often it's quite hidden. Some of the activism has to do with protecting the traditions and the ancestors. And I speak often about Oka because I was involved in that. And you remember Oka, right? Up in Canada.
I don't remember that. No.
Oh, okay. So there's an Oka Island in west of Montreal, and there was a standoff that went on for months. And what was going on really is that Oka is the site of creation according to the native version of the story, and that all the ancient, burials or whatever are on the island. And then they built a golf course on top of that, and that was okay. But then they were going to go further and develop that area without really the right. And so there was a big protest, but the natives couldn't exactly say that. They didn't want people digging up these quite ancient artifacts. So they couldn't actually say, oh, this is this is the place of creation for North America. So they just pointed to a recent cemetery, recent meaning 1700. And they said, well, you can't build here because of these graves. But that wasn't really the whole story. That was just the cover story. And people never really understood how deep it was. And you're talking about your bulldozers are about to, destroy the very essence of what we have of the creation itself. The same thing happened with the Hopi. A man named Dan Evahema lived well over 100, and he held out. He didn't want any environmental damage. He wanted everything to be as it was all along. He lived without electricity, without water, running water. He got it from the river. He had an assistant named Depsimana who helped with these chores and growing the corn, and she became my good friend. And so I heard these stories about him living without any of these niceties. The minute he died, they came in with bulldozers and backhoes and dug trenches to put the water pipes into his location and build houses there. And they dug up one of the most sacred bundles of the Hopi. And the prophecy was, well, if you dig up this bundle, then it's all over. And it was a very dire prophecy. And here we see that was in around 2001. And here we see, the whole earth seems to be shaking.
Mm.
And the Kogi, by the way, go search the Kogi online and look for their prophecies from a year ago. We put out some films about prophecies that Mother Earth was speaking to them and giving them warnings. She's starting to lose her ability to take care of herself because she's all stuck with pollution, and so she's going to take it back. Mm-hmm. And there might be fires, and there are volcanoes happening now and earthquakes as well as fires. So the Kogi would certainly be convinced.
Kogi.
So that's just Kogi, Kogi.
They is this the Kogi in the wilderness of Colombia?
Yes.
Okay.
Going well. Have you ever heard them speak?
My wife was in. Yeah, she has. Anna?
Yeah, I was in the Peace Corps. And I knew a family that worked with them, the Sendall family. And they have told so many stories, the stories that the mama, the chief of the tribe, and how that person felt that they were the one that made the sun rise and set. And then in recent years, when the snow disappeared from the top of the mountain, it was something they'd never seen before. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're blessed to have met the Kogis or met anyone who met the Kogis. They come to the United States still, and it depends, different places every time. But, I've tried to, do what I could to pass on some of these messages, but it's a little overwhelming sometimes. Mm-hmm. But there is a film that you should see that they put out a year ago about speaking with the spirit of Mother Earth and the prophecies of the Kogi. And there's several of them, but there's one in particular, and I can't remember the exact title because they're similar to each other, but any of them I think would be very, very inspiring in a way for activism because they're warnings. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell a story I'm glad to hear, always glad to talk about the Kogi. Met with them 3 or 4 times, and just beautiful people. But my main elder is William Commanda, who's Algonquin from Oka and other places, and he was carrying the 7 fires prophecy belts, and the belts would speak to him somehow telepathically. And they said, this was back in 1972, that he had been interviewed in French and about the trees and this prophecy that he had about the trees being cut down. And of course, Canada does cut down trees. So as I was writing a book about 7 fires prophecy, somebody on the reservation about a few 100 yards from where he lived moved a file cabinet in their attic so they could repaint the floor. And they moved the file cabinet, and underneath the file cabinet was paper, newspaper that had been put there to preserve the floor, only it had been preserved there 50 years ago. So they moved the cabinet, there's the paper, they start reading it, 50 years old, and there's William Commanda speaking in French. And so they immediately called me. They said, "You got to see this. This is amazing." And I said, "Well, the French is really fancy. I'm not sure I understand everything." So this lady I was involved in at the time just translated it. And it turns out, he said, that if we don't stop cutting the trees and harming her, then Mother Earth will reprimand us. You know, in French, you know, reprimand, right? Us, and will be ravaged, and there will be an epidemic that will ravage 60% of the world's population. He said this in writing in 1972, and it came out that day all over again. And so I published that in my book, Henry Hudson and the Algonquins, which is really about 7 fire prophecies. And, you know, I experienced COVID, and I would say ravaged is probably the one word that kind of sneaks into the English language that defines how I felt and how many people have felt. And it is about 60% or so, I think, were affected. And it was a reprimand, according to his prophecy, of harming all those trees. And there may be a relationship between oxygen and COVID. It's quite possible. Or it's just a mystical thing. This is something you can't explain. So, yeah, that was like, and so he was also an activist for the nicest activist. William Commanda, you can look him up anywhere. He was like the Pete Seeger of Canada, you know, and people would come. And I'll tell you, I think you'll understand this significance. It's how do you explain how impactful someone is who's just a long-haired old man living in the woods, right? Well, when he died, there was a funeral, a great memorial procession, and I was the MC, of course, because I was his helper, you know. And I was standing on the stage, and we had a mic. Almost didn't, but we had this mic. We had to this forest. And as I was standing there, I see this woman start running towards me, and she's way on the edge of the woods. She's like 2 football fields away, big black woman with a big blue hat, and she starts running right towards me really fast and staring at me. And so I just kind of stopped it. Okay, so what's going on? You know, I thought, well, I feel like she's going to jump and tackle me here, but that couldn't possibly happen. Well, that's what happened. She ran up, he leaped on the stage and just missed me. And I said, "Hello." And just like my great grandmother, I said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yeah, well, you know, I'm from this delegation from South Africa. And Nelson Mandela says, you know, he's very grieved by the death of your grandfather, this grandfather, William Commanda," said, and he wanted to be here, but he couldn't because he has address Congress today in South Africa. And said, "We had all these problems getting here, and planes were delayed in Detroit and, you know, in France and Germany and everywhere. And so we just arrived, and we're sorry we're late, but there's 9 of us that he sent to give our greetings and his, you know, his farewell to all of you." And so then she gave this beautiful speech from Nelson Mandela to my ancestor. And so that was the nicest activist you'd ever meet. And he would, they asked him to go and speak at Parliament in Canada, and he would speak in French and English and then Algonquin and Micmac, and they'd applaud, and he'd tell him off too, and he'd still applaud. So there has been always a way to kind of heal the world through activism, and it's a gift, but it's becoming harder because, you know, there's more acrimony out there, and so it's a little harder than it used to be. But that's where I come from, and my Aunt Helen was an activist, without doubt, you know, and yet maintained friendships with everyone. And William Commanda did the same thing. So I hope that it's still possible to do that, because creation has to continue. It's our goal. So that's my message, an activist.
And I love that sort of segue, Evan, to speak about your ancestors and this ongoing legacy of activism for creation to continue, as you said, which is a central aspiration and commitment that we all share. And I know that we're just about over our allotted time this evening. So I just wanted to put Evan's contact email in the chat for those who'd like to follow up with him who may not have had a chance to voice your question. I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. Evan, I don't know if your schedule permits, but I thought I would just formally conclude the Zoom gathering for this evening and to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to be returning next month, I hope, with Sister Kathleen Dagnan on Monday, the 3rd of March. So I hope to see you then. I'll formally pause our gathering for now and close our circle. But if folks would like to linger for a bit, Evan, I'll let you take the lead.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thank you everybody for.
So,
feel free to leave as you need. Thanks.
Okay. So we'll see you again, right? That's what we say. See you again.
Yeah, no experiences.
Like the circle.
Healing. Well, Diana, Diana has told me over the years she has seen and witnessed experiences of healing in the Kogi people. I think you might have written about it a little bit.
No, that was the Stendhals.
Oh yeah.
And they were there as missionaries. They went with Loma Linda and to make their language into a written language. But they've maintained contact. Patricia still lives in Colombia and still has significant contact with the folks that she's known. They went down in the 60s, so they've been there many, and her children all live and still are connected with them.
Well, Sam will give you my email, or all of you an email, and any of that information about the Kogis, please send it to my email, evan.pritchard7@gmail. Because like I said, I met with the Kogis at least 3 times. Each one was life-changing. Tell stories, but I think I've heard of the Stendhals. But yeah, there's a woman, and again, I'm not prepared with her name. It's on the tip of my tongue, but there's this one woman who's half Kogi and half Spanish, and she does a really terrific job, not only translating, but interpreting and answering questions. And then she can, of course, ask the mamas and, and asking about that. But, which I can remember her name, but she is actually the voice of Mother Earth in the movie.
Oh, wow.
It's just perfect because she understands the Kogi message.
Yeah.
And sorry, I can send it to Sam later with the info, but I didn't think of it. But
yeah, feel free to.
A year ago this came out, but the voice is very striking, and it's the voice of the woman who speaks for the Kogis here in New York. So I could tell some stories about the Kogis. But
yeah, feel free to pass along any follow-up resources to me, Evan. I did want to ask you, while Maddie is still on the call, she had a question about the cardinal, the significance of the cardinal in particular, which she says has stayed through all seasons and taps at her window every morning. Any thoughts on that?
Well, they're all season birds. They love the winter. And they are associated with several things. One, you said cardinal, right? It's associated with the family, and they're very good with their own offspring, and they make nests very seriously with the male and female. So they're good models for us humans. And furthermore, the cardinal is red and also has a kind of a crown. Our Micmac women wear a similar kind of hat. It has the little fin on it, like the cardinal, and it's red. And the cardinal's color gives it a certain respect among Mi'kmaq because the color red is very, highly regarded. And so the bird being red has special status as some would even say king of the birds. You see, they're like royal. And of course, somehow, the connection with the cardinals and the church is probably somehow related, and I've never really researched it. I think goes way back, because the cardinals have that sacredness to them and dignity.
Thank
So
you.
that's welcome. I wanted to say that, I want to talk a little bit about Padre Pio, even though I'd have to kind of stick him in here, but I did a pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo when I was very young on my own. And I found his cell. He had just died. I got there late. It was about, 5 years later. But, he had said that, when things are darkest, that you become the light. You are the light. And to continue, don't just, complain how dark things are, but you become the light. That's when you're needed. And he did, And so I went to his little cell where he was living, and it was tiny and very simple clothing. And some of his prophecies are turned out to be accurate, and also his teachings are very inspiring. So he was like down the street from St. Francis, but about, 800 years later, he had a lot of that same, humility. And so again, a couple of the things he said seem particularly appropriate now. He said there would be like 3 days of darkness someday. It would really test all of us, and that we get through the 3 days, we would become, brighter stars and better people. And during those 3 days, you really got to know where your spiritual tools are, and be connected to the Creator in various ways. So I don't know. I've always had that connection inwardly with Padre Pio, and there's a book that's called Padre Pio, which I recommend. Yes.
I hate to speak so much, but you're covering everything that I'm kind of passionate about and has radicalized me, I think. Padre Pio wrote a woman friend of his, an American, or she lived in Italy. She pursued Padre Pio. She wrote The Roads to Padre Pio. You know the name possibly? I cannot recall her name. But she followed him around, interviewed him. She was blessed by him, all sorts of recordings. And the one thing that I take from it, Evan, is that I don't know if it's in print anymore, Roads to Padre Pio.
I saw it yesterday on Amazon.
Oh, good. Well, I recommend it too. Now, the subject of bilocation with Padre Pio, she experienced, and I think a number of people have experienced, the smell of roses.
Yes. Yes, not just Padre Pio.
Okay.
a lot of I experienced that once in particular. It was actually outside in the woods in this particular spot. I never knew the whole story, but it definitely smelled of roses. And also with some of the yogis in India, there's that expression, is sending that smell, the aroma. And Padre Pio and a number of saintly people have been able to generate that aroma. So I believe it. I've experienced it. But maybe not, maybe that wasn't Padre Pio, that it could have been.
Yeah.
Because I was already, reading about him and at that time. But yeah, I definitely believe that. And why it's some of those things that I can't necessarily explain, scientifically or even metaphysically. But the roses are a consciousness. And consciousness can take the form of a cloud. And in the spirit world, consciousness can form a cloud that has music to it or smell. And that's the consciousness itself. Doesn't need a body. And that's pretty, I guess, pretty basic. But you're interested in metaphysics, I understand, and you understand that in the in the, how you say, the cosmic field, the quantum field, that bodies really aren't so important. It's important as the embodiment of consciousness. So there are clouds of consciousness that you can hear as music. And that's where I specialized in trying to develop the ability to hear those like Mozart did. And it's like archaeology, is that once you find this cloud of consciousness, then you can continue to dig away at it and unearth different aspects of it slowly. And then you could rewrite the music or the writing, the scripture, so to speak, that's in the cloud. It's pretty interesting.
So Mozart, go ahead. I've spoken too much. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mozart. What about Mozart?
Oh, Mozart. Well, we just happened to see Mr. Holland's Opus on TV last night. What he said, who's the actor?
Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss was saying about Mozart and his funeral. What's it called? The symphony.
Requiem.
Yeah.
The Requiem.
What he said about the Requiem. I'll leave it up to you there.
Well, you tell me. What did you say about the Requiem?
Well, what did he say? I think what he said, he was telling students, these were young students who were just learning how to play their first year, I think, clarinet, the girl with the clarinet, and beautiful pieces. And Mozart chopped away the piano and he put it on the floor. He took away the piano legs, dropped it on the floor, and got down himself on the floor. He was blind or close to being blind at that time too, and he wrote the Requiem. That's what I remember.
Well, the story of, I love anything about Mozart, but he had a humble end. But what's interesting too is George Frederick Handel had a vision while he was writing the Messiah, and he claimed that his room was filled with literally a choir of angels that he could see and hear, and that his servants became convinced that they were really there. And because he was communicating and speaking to them, to these angels back and forth, the servants could only hear his part. But it's very interesting to read about that. There's one or two writers who have written in great detail about that moment. And he was writing that piece basically with very little money. He didn't get the grant he wanted, or the money from the royals. So he wrote it for the poor Irish, and he had it performed in Ireland for pennies. But one of the greatest music performances in history, from all accounts. And then, of course, eventually the king wanted to hear what it was all about. And the story goes, during the Hallelujah chorus, which is pretty far down in the piece, that the king stood up, and nobody knew why. But when the king stands up, everybody has to stand up. So everybody stood up during the Hallelujah chorus. And it is really the greatest piece around, and totally inspired. And he wrote that about the amount of time it would take to copy that score, because I've sung it many times. I sing in choirs and sight reading. And I've sung that with the Catholic University Orchestra, and I've sung it various Presbyterian churches, but also with the Bruderhof, can really sit down and sing that Hallelujah chorus amazingly. So I sight read through that. But it would take you the same amount of time it took him to write it down, the same amount of time, to copy it. He just wrote it all in a flow. And he was crying most of the time because the beauty of the angels. And he never varied on his story. The servant said they could see him talking to the angels. And when you hear the piece, and are open to that, I think it's convincing. Also, Mahler's Eighth Symphony is the same thing. I've sung that also, and it would take at least the amount of time it took him to write it would take to copy it over. And that's a very complicated piece, but also has an angelic section where the sopranos just slide up a major scale 2 octaves. Ridiculous. That's not even part of Western music, but that's what I believe that angels sing like.
What about the fire?
There's a popular song about angels in my heart, and they have that same figure behind it, going up 2 octaves of major scale, the sopranos.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
Hildegard of Bingen, the fire, the Legend of Fire, those pieces sung by many, but I think a group of 4 voices. Have you heard any of that?
No, but Madeleine L'Engle wrote about her. Did you ever read a book by Madeleine L'Engle about Hildegard of Bingen? She was very, very tuned in, Madeleine L'Engle. And she was L'Engle. She was a minister, a priest.
Yeah.
Among her many abilities.
L'Engle also wrote the foreword to a book about C.S. Lewis's death of his wife. And she lost her husband, and they compared the grief of the two.
Hugh Alexander.
Yeah.
That was her husband.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we can hear
it was a very
from,
magical relationship.
Yeah, sorry to interject, but I think Sarah had a question in the chat that I would love to, give her time to voice.
I'm just realizing this is a burning question now. And it doesn't seem very spiritual, but I'm going to make it spiritual. Okay. Because I think it's just so important, which is that on Wednesday here in South Carolina, the tribal, they're called the Tribal Alliance of South Carolina Nations, are going to come together and sign a historic treaty, which they're really promoting like the Dickens, during this tumultuous time, and during this time of the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, where the Catawba fought with the Patriots and the Cherokee fought with the Loyalists, right? I mean, this special time. First of all, I'm wondering if you're aware of this, that this is going to happen. And secondly, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the possibilities for that alliance and that treaty that they're going to sign about working together.
Yeah, I think it's great. I heard about it. The Cherokee and the Catawbas were coming together. I heard from a friend of mine who was slightly involved in that, but I think it's terrific because that's part of what we call the way of the heron, which is like a peacemaking, but on sometimes in a very small scale, sometimes in a very large scale, when you're really healing the planet, the people of the planet. So if the Cherokee can get along with Catawbas, anybody can get along, right? But that's great. It's so great. So the Catawbas were pushed further west along. There was a trail there. It's now a major highway, but pushed west into, the Western Hills where the Cherokee were. So that's where they kind of made friends and enemies, right? The Catawba were all on the coast very early, and then were continually pushed west. So you see on the map, a good map, you have South Carolina and then into Tennessee. You can see these trails and you can see these place names like Catawba and Cherokee and, Snowbird, and the Cherokee places are well known. But Catawbas don't have the same publicity, And so you don't hear as much about him, but I've known many. Now, there's black Catawbas and white Catawbas, they split into different, according to who they married. And I'll tell you a secret. If you ever had Kentucky Fried Chicken, look at that guy, Colonel Harlan Sanders. No, look at his eyes. Anyway, Catawba. I was told he's Catawba.
Colonel Sanders.
The company does not want me to say this. They said they want nothing to do with it. Because the company, owns everything now, including his face and his right arm and everything. But yeah, he's, I was told he was Catawba. And does that look?
I really want all of I just got to say this. I would like all of Native America to just rise up together and use Native American spirituality to heal this nation. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And I'm wondering, how if that's pie in the sky or it just possible.
Well, gosh, I mean, I agree with you, and that's what I think about all the time, is how we could do that. And yet there's all this even more division somehow. I don't know why, but there seems to be more division than ever among the people. But in certain groups, there's more power, spiritual power generated. But what happened is some of the young people haven't learned the language and haven't learned the ceremony. And people have tried very hard to inspire them to do so. And a lot of places, that cell phone and that computer, and all those Xbox, I don't even know, it's a very powerful influence. And so they speak English and they don't get it. But maybe they'll wake up too. At some point, maybe they'll wake up. But there's a lot of, I don't have a lot of good news in that area, but there are pockets where there's a great amount of power, potential with Native people right now. And more people understand that power, but the fact is that there are others that work harder to stop it. Now, when I was, kind of younger man, there was a lot of that passionate spirituality among our Algonquin people. And there was a movie that I liked called Powwow Highway, which is a humorous comedy about some Cheyenne people who are our relatives. And they're very innocent about their approach to their activism, their spirituality. And it's all very funny, but it's just riddled with this deep, deep teaching that's coming out, even though they don't even know it. So Powwow Highway might be a window into some of that. And some of it's probably offensive. And
there's a Richard Rohr does a morning or a daily podcast from the Center of Contemplation and Action, and he talks in some of his books about the second half of life. And I think a lot of Native American peoples have reached the second half of life at a younger age than, say, white America or Black America, or maybe not Black America, but you know what I'm getting at, European America. I think the second half of life has to be reached, or our leaders in the U.S., they're not going to be able to solve anything. They're not going. There's an openness and there's a forgiveness that I feel like I didn't pick it up until I was in my 50s or 60s, but it takes a long time and there's a lot of suffering.
Maybe you'll live to 100.
May we all.
That's the good. So tell me more about that. I don't know his work, Richard Rohr, but I wrote it down.
Rohr. Well, Rohr.
R-O-H.
R-O-H-R. Franciscan. I'm sure many in the group have more to share about Richard than me. He has come to North Carolina. He's older now, and he's 80. he has people that help him all over the world. Brian McLaren is one, several sisters, and he came to the Wild Goose Fest here in North Carolina, close to where we live, and he stopped going out a few years ago, but he goes all out. He's radicalized, and he's still a Catholic priest, and his future is wide open, and his steps are like the wind. I think he's like a wild goose, just like McLaren and some of the sisters. Well, many of them, Sister Helen Pritchard and many of the sisters. The sister who works against the death penalty. Many of them. So that's our life, and that's I think many of us believe is, yeah. What's that? Yeah.
Sister Helen Pritchard.
Thank you. Yeah. You should come to the Wild Goose.
Okay.
Come to the Wild Goose. You could speak.
Sure. Okay. Well, Sam has my email. I've been .Pritchard7, and I do travel when I can. You know, this year is the 400th anniversary of New York City with the Dutch, and so they had me going around here and there because the Dutch interacted with the natives. I want to mention there was a Father Tito that I worked with, who was a Catholic priest who became the what's the word? Chaplain. It's a hard word for me. The chaplain at Ground Zero, almost immediately after the original chaplain died, and I brought him to Marist College and at least once, and he just could amaze any crowd. He did so many incredible stories, and they're all very moving and sometimes miraculous, and sometimes just very heartfelt. That was his job, is to help heal the people around 9/11. And my favorite story, by the way, and people say, I mean, he said it, it's true. So did other people, but there was this bulldozer that was, trying to dig out. And there was still, they didn't know, that might still be survivors in there down the hole, but they kept trying to pull things out. And so this steam shovel just stopped. And they, turn it off, turn it on, and for some reason, nothing would work. Nothing could get it started again. It was right there in the way. And so that Father Tito, what do you say? What can you do about this? You're the priest, And I said, well, yeah, I guess theoretically I should be able to do something. So he jumps into the steam shovel and he takes out his rosary, right? And he sticks it right on there and starts right up. And they had hundreds of witnesses, And so that's kind of put him on the map. And we showed us pictures of his rosary. I guess he still had it. But anyway, he's no longer with us because just about everybody who worked at 9/11 died within 10 years. And he knew that probably would happen. But he was part native from Ecuador, I think, and kind of a wild guy, very super independent and very funny and very sharp, Father Tito. And I knew his last name right now, I can't think of it, but easy to look up. And it was such a pleasure working with him during that whole year after 9/11. It was I brought lots of people. We had lectures, and we'd bring, a couple hundred people to hear him talk, and they all were happy to hear him talk. And very moving what he would say. So that's somebody you might want to know about.
Yeah. What about Frederick Buechner? Have you read much of Frederick?
No, tell me about him. I don't know anything about him.
Well, I'm reading one called Clown in the Belfry right now. Buechner's an ordained minister and a writer from Vermont, and he died within the last few years too, in his 90s. Beekner had a hard childhood. His father, his father committed suicide when he was about 10, and it affected Beekner all his life. And his writing, he has such longing and passion to reunite with his loved ones. It almost goes to the point of crying out in his prose, which is sometimes can be like poetry. In A Clown in the Belfry, Clown in the Belfry, that's what he wants to be. He wants to be like a catcher in the rye, you know. He wants to be there to catch people, and so he's not a traditional minister. He writes about sinful people like Leo Bebb in the Book of Bebb. It's a 4-part series of short novels. Leo Bebb was a child molester, and yet Leo Bebb is noble in the book, and Beekner is able to make him noble and show how forgiveness can arrive.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Well, Evan, I know we're well past our allotted time, even though we could stay up all night. For those who are here, do you have any short parting message before we set off into the evening and follow up with you via email?
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the stories, and those rituals we did were just uplifting. I just really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thanks for your reflection on the Native Americans down here.
And if you actually do them, they're very helpful every day. And I just want to say then, you know, when I went to San Giovanni Rotondo and I asked all these people, I said, have you ever heard of Padre Pio? And every person had met him in some way. And even young people said, oh, yes, I was baptized by him. And I asked everybody, well, do you think he was the real deal? Do you think the prophecies are really accurate? Do you think he was a really spiritual person? And of course, he had the stigmata too, which is another thing. And I actually had a friend who was not a priest, but very devout, who developed the stigmata and showed me, so like I'd seen it. And they all said, oh, yes, he was the real deal. He was the man of God. And so I talked to, I was on a bus and I asked this kid, I said, you ever, Padre Pio? So yeah, you baptized me. And that guy over there, and that guy over there, and that couple, he did their wedding, and they all testified that he was the, a true man of God. And I felt that about him. And in terms of bilocation, I do believe in that. Whether I can tell you stories about that literally, like physical bilocation, I don't know. But I do believe it, and I know other people who apparently do that. And it's all a way of becoming more of an effective tool. It's not about a trick, it's out of need. So I think a lot of that happened during World War II when Padre Pio was very, very active. And it was interesting that with all that was going on in World War II, when Hitler and Mussolini were marching past his church, and he had to decide whether, he was going to endanger everybody and run out there and tell them to go away. He said, well, I can't do that because they'll burn down my church, So he worked networks and organizing and different things he did, and he helped, people and brought them into refuge to hide from those who had basically fought, or tried to stop the Nazis and the Mussolini's people. They had to, run away and hide in the church, and he brought them in. And that's all he could do. And I think that's an interesting question for our time. It's like he realized the danger to his entire church, and so he worked in secret.
Yeah.
Okay. But the story is like the younger generation is our hope too, as Native people, even though right now it's a problem and they don't want to learn their language. I created a book of Micmac language for the schools, and it was copied. The tribe printed up couple hundred copies. But then what happened was, then they ran out and they started Xeroxing them and handing them out to the students in all the 30 different schools and reservations. And for years, and even now, people just carry around these little photocopies of my book on Micmac language. And yet everybody, all the young people were able to get a grasp of it. And so, of course, I don't make anything on any of that, right? They're all running off copies. And in that same vein, I'll end with this little story, is that I was working in this school with this Mayan fellow who was very spiritual, and his mother was some kind of priestess or something in the Mayans. And then we've been working together for a while, and I'm dressed like this and he's dressed like that, and we're working with the kids and we're alone. And I said, "Have you ever heard of Evan Pritchard?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Evan Pritchard." He said, "No way, you're not Evan Pritchard." And he said, "Well, he wrote Native New Yorkers." And I said, "Yeah, I wrote Native New Yorkers." And he said, but the picture on the cover is this giant 200-foot tall, Aboriginal savage, and that must be, we always figure that's Evan Pritchard. I said, "No, that's a picture of, of a Montauk Indian who lived in New York City, and put it on the cover, but I wrote the book." He said, we all thought you were him, and we call you the Tata, the grandfather, right, in Mayan. And so I guess you are, but you don't look anything like the guy in the cover. So that was like funny. But then he told me this even funnier story. He says, we all read that book because we needed to know where all the sacred spots were in order to do our ceremonies. Otherwise, we can't do the ceremonies. We don't know where the sacred spots are, the people before us. And that's the only book that tells you. So I said, "Oh, well, that's great." So I sold a lot of books. He says, "No, you probably didn't sell one book, because one guy copied it over he got it from the library, New York Public Library, as soon as it came out, Xeroxed that and translated into Spanish, and then made copies of that Spanish book over and over for hundreds of copies and gave them away for free. So you probably didn't ever sell one book." But he says, all the Mayans know your book, because otherwise, how could we do ceremony? So there, I'm this Tata for certain Mayan people working in the streets with their carts, and working in the offices, and cleaning the rooms. They apparently all know my book. I'm very proud of that. Well, I'm going to end on that story. And thank you all.
For your graciousness for that, and for giving us
very welcome.
time.
Totally.
Welcome.
Yeah, so grateful for you, Evan, and may this gathering be a way of preserving and celebrating all the ancestral wisdom that you're bringing forth. And thank you for blessing all of us this evening, and for all the joy and sense of vision that you have instilled in all of us. So I really look forward to staying connected, and yeah, many blessings to all of you as you head home this evening.
Thank you.
Blessings. We'll see you again up in the Multas. See you again. And yeah, let me know about what's going on in South Carolina. I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm open.
Okay.
Sounds good.
July. Yeah.
Okay.
Well.
Okay, so I'm gonna punch out here, Sam, and talk to you soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
And, Thursday, maybe see you Thursday, right?
Love that.